Now also live on Facebook. If you are joining on Facebook, we will not be taking any questions from Facebook. You will have to join the webinar to participate. And now I can do my screen share and let everybody populate the room. We have 35 attendees right now, and the number is growing. We had about 160 people signed up for today, so hopefully we will get them all on board in the next few moments. And if you're watching on Facebook and you would like to ask any questions, you will have to log in to the Zoom webinar to ask any questions or participate live. So I'm going to immediately go to my next slide as we begin this, and I will be reading this statement in verbatim. So the Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Association is presenting a special webinar to provide interested patients a clear understanding of how to access a recently, April 2022, FDA-approved first-in-class medication for the treatment of symptomatic obstructive hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. The drug's name is Camzyos or mavacamten. I need to say this for the purposes of this event. I, Lisa Salberg, founder and CEO, requested representatives from Bristol Myers Squibb to present this information in webinar format to help ensure patients and families a clear understanding of the approved label indication, risk evaluation and mitigation strategies, REMS, the role of the BMS patient navigator, patient assistance programs for various insurance subtypes, and a deeper look into Medicare Part D and how it works for those who may soon be transitioning to this type of insurance access. We are grateful to the Alliance for Patient Access for assisting us with the Medicare Part D segment. Thank you, Gavin. This session is not intended to determine patient's treatment, provide clinical comments about individual management, or suggest that the agent being discussed is superior to other therapies available for obstructive hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. And I want to be very clear that the funding to make this presentation possible came from the general operating budget of the HCMA. We have not received any compensation to provide this segment. We just feel that it's really important that patients have a really clear understanding of how to access the drug if they should want it. So with that being said, I am going to welcome the team from Bristol Myers Squibb, who will each identify themselves as we go forward, and Gavin, who is here from the Alliance for Patient Access as well. So everybody say hi.
Hi.
Hello.
There you go. It's not exactly those tough corporate events, right? You get to deal with me rather than other people. Okay. So, I'm going to go back to my screen share here for a second, just to show everybody the agenda as it relates to the team from BMS and what we're going to be hearing today. And we're going to go one by one with these in a moment, but we're going to get a welcome introduction from Michelle Calopi, Vice President of U.S. Cardiovascular and Established Products for BMS. We're going to get an overview on Camzyos and REMS from Michael Palladino, Director of U.S. Medical from BMS. I'm just shortening Bristol Myers Squibb to BMS, or we'll be here all day. We're going to talk about the overview of insurance coverage methods with Tim McGovern, the Director of Access Marketing. And then we are going to look at the patient support programs. And we have two speakers here, and I hope I do not kill a name, Tracy Lukey and Nilofer Wasti. I might have
Nilofer Wasti. Yep.
Thank you for the correction. And then we'll do some Q&A. Then after they're done with their segment, we're going to talk about Medicare. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this to Michelle Calopi. And thank you all for your participation today.
Great. Thank you, Lisa, and good afternoon to all of you joining us today. And first and foremost, Lisa, let me say we're honored and thrilled that you requested to have us here. And we're really excited to share the information with you and with your patient community. So the next slide I have is actually the one Lisa covered, which is the agenda slide. And as you said, we've got a panel of experts, and we're really excited to share our information with all of you. So it's a packed agenda. So I'm going to move right into my first slide, which is the next slide, which is really, as Lisa said, earlier this year on April 28th, the FDA approved Camzyos for symptomatic obstructive HCM. And I can tell you, we are really thrilled that Camzyos achieved this approval, because Camzyos is known as a cardiac myosin inhibitor. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in Michael's section, but it's the first of its kind that has been approved. And it's really exciting for all of us, and hopefully for all of you as you get more information. And here at Bristol Myers Squibb, our mission is to discover, develop, and deliver innovative medicines that are going to transform patients' lives. And we know that Camzyos has the potential to help patients. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Michael Palladino, to take you through the overview of Camzyos. Michael?
Great. Thank you, Michelle. So again, my name is Michael Palladino, and I'm a medical director on the US team for Camzyos or mavacamten. Completely excited to be here. I spent about 10 years in hospital practice as a pharmacist in Philadelphia before entering the pharmaceutical space. So it's been quite some time before I've had the opportunity to get in front of a number of patients. So this is a wonderful opportunity. So Lisa, thank you, and thank you to the HCMA. I have a number of slides here that are very content heavy, okay? But my goal is to really deliver a number of educational points. And if I do a good enough job, I think if you can come out of here understanding what Camzyos is and briefly understanding the REMS program and how we keep patients safe, then I've done my job. Here you see on this slide, Camzyos or mavacamten. As said before, Camzyos is prescribed as a prescription medicine used to treat adults with symptomatic, obstructive, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy or HCM, and may improve your symptoms and your ability to be active, or functional capacity as we call it. Next slide. So much of my presentation, I like to keep it very casual. There are moments when I cannot be casual. This will seem fairly robotic, but here is some safety information that I want to read through word for word to make sure we keep everyone very safe and we are very clear with the potential of adverse events with Camzyos or mavacamten. So Camzyos may cause serious side effects, including heart failure, a condition where the heart cannot pump with enough force. Heart failure is a serious condition that can lead to death. You must have echocardiograms before you take your first dose and during your treatment with Camzyos to help your healthcare provider understand how your heart is responding to Camzyos. People who develop a serious infection or irregular heartbeat have a greater risk of heart failure during treatment with Camzyos. Tell your healthcare provider or get medical help right away if you develop new or worsening shortness of breath, chest pain, fatigue, swelling in your legs, a racing sensation in your heart, also known as palpitations, or rapid weight gain. So I'll stop there 1 second. Take home messages. If you have any of these symptoms, swelling, chest pain, etc., call your healthcare provider immediately, okay? And this is not unusual, right? This is not just specific to Camzyos. This is if you feel these symptoms at all, you want to notify your healthcare provider. The risk of heart failure is also increased when Camzyos is taken with certain other medications. Tell your healthcare provider about the medicines you take, both prescribed and obtained over the counter before and during treatment with Camzyos. So these are known as drug-drug interactions. There is the potential for drug-drug interactions with Camzyos. And again, just like any other medicine, when you start, stop, increase dose, whether it's over the counter or a supplement, you need to talk to your pharmacist and the prescriber. Because of the serious risk of heart failure, Camzyos is only available through a restricted program called the Camzyos Risk Evaluation and Mitigation Strategy, also known as the REMS program. Your healthcare provider must be enrolled in the Camzyos REMS program in order for you to be prescribed Camzyos. Before you take Camzyos, you must enroll in the Camzyos REMS program. Talk to your healthcare provider about how to enroll in the Camzyos REMS program. You will be given information about the program when you are enrolled. Before you take Camzyos, your healthcare provider and pharmacist will make sure you understand how to take Camzyos safely, which will include returning for echocardiograms when advised by your healthcare provider. Camzyos can only be dispensed by a certified pharmacy that participates in the Camzyos REMS program. Your healthcare provider can give you information on how to find a certified pharmacy. You will not be able to get a Camzyos prescription at your local pharmacy. If you have any questions about Camzyos REMS program, ask your healthcare provider or go to www.camzyosrems.com or call the 1-800 number listed. Okay, I said a lot about REMS. So in short, as a patient, you must be enrolled. Your prescriber can help you with this. Your prescriber must be enrolled. And lastly, a specialty pharmacy must be enrolled, not just the pharmacy around the corner. Okay, so that was a mouthful. We got through important safety information. We will now go to the next slide. So what is obstructive hypertrophic cardiomyopathy? And many of you know this already, but the reason why this is important that we put this slide in there is if you truly remember and understand this, then you can understand how important how novel Camzyos is and how it helps treat symptomatic obstructive HCM. So we know that cardiomyopathy is a disease of the heart and a thickened heart muscle. So as that heart muscle thickens, particularly the left ventricle that you see in these cartoons, oxygenated blood cannot fill that ventricle the way it should. As such, oxygenated blood cannot leave that left ventricle the way it should. And as that muscle thickens, it can also often become obstructed. So now you do not have enough oxygenated blood getting to your brain, your lungs, tissues, and your organs. Then you get these resultant symptoms like shortness of breath. So the beginning starts at this thickening of the heart and this lack of oxygenated blood being pumped throughout the body, then resulting in symptoms. We know that HCM and obstructive HCM can be affecting up to 1 in 500 Americans at this time. And we also know, and one of the reasons why we're here today, is we want to bring awareness to this pathophysiology and to this disease. Next slide. So after understanding that, let's take a look at the mechanism of action of Camzyos.
Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, also known as HCM, is a condition that affects the function of your heart. If you have HCM, it means that the walls of your heart have become thicker and stiffer than normal. In one type of HCM, called obstructive HCM, your heart muscle gets so thick that it blocks or reduces blood flow from the heart to the rest of your body, which can lead you to feel symptoms like shortness of breath, chest pain, dizziness, or others. Camzyos is the first and only FDA-approved cardiac myosin inhibitor. Camzyos targets the source of symptomatic obstructive HCM. Camzyos works differently by directly targeting a structure within your heart muscle called myosin. Let's take a closer look at the role of myosin in this disease. Myosin, along with another structure called actin, are proteins that are responsible for making your heart muscle contract and relax, which can contribute to your heart pumping. Imagine that myosin acts like people, and actin acts like a rope. When myosin attaches to actin, it's like a person pulling on a rope. When enough people pull on the rope, your heart muscle contracts. When enough people take a break from pulling, your heart muscle can relax. With obstructive HCM, too many people are pulling on the rope, which can make it difficult for your heart muscle to relax. This means your heart has to work harder and use more energy. Camzyos, also known as mavacamten, works directly with the myosin, helping more of them to let go of the actin or take a break from pulling on the rope. This allows your heart to relax. which may improve how your heart fills with blood, reduce how hard your heart has to work when it's pumping blood out to your body, and reduce how much energy your heart uses for each heartbeat. If you're interested in learning more, ask your cardiologist about Camzyos.
Great. So that's a wonderful video that is describing the unique mechanism of action of Camzyos or mavacamten. I can't add much to it other than the one take-home message that was described in that video, that this is the first time there has been a medication targeting the source and the cause of obstructive HCM. Unlike some standard of cares that have been around 50, 60 years that really were not developed for this particular disease, Camzyos or mavacamten works at the source of symptomatic obstructive HCM. Next slide. So now we talked about some safety information. We talked about mechanism of action of Camzyos. Now we dive a little bit deeper into the data or the science that brought Camzyos to prescribers and to patients. And what you see here is a depiction of the Explorer program. And that was the trial which granted mavacamten or Camzyos the FDA approval. So Camzyos improved symptoms and the ability to be active in the Explorer program. And so you'll hear me say a lot over the next few slides, feel and function. So when this trial was developed, this 251 patient trial, we were measuring endpoints around how the patient feels, so the symptoms, and the function, how that person and that heart is functioning off Camzyos therapy versus placebo. And the main efficacy outcome was looking at the New York Heart Association class for symptoms. So New York Heart Association class being class 1, asymptomatic, class 4 being extremely symptomatic. Patients enrolled in the Explorer program were class 2 or class 3. And patients could either receive Camzyos or placebo. But all patients had the opportunity to receive background therapy with beta blocker or calcium channel blocker. You see these little images on the left and the right. When we talked about function within these endpoints, we had patients on bicycles, and we measured how well they functioned under stress in the Camzyos arm and in the placebo arm. And what we saw for this primary outcome was people taking Camzyos achieved this primary endpoint compared to placebo 37% versus 17%. So roughly double the magnitude in the Camzyos arm versus placebo. So these patients saw significant improvement when it came to this feel and this function endpoint. Next slide. So when the steering committee and these experts developed this trial, they had that primary efficacy endpoint that we just described. They also have a number of secondary endpoints describing both feel and function. And one of the messages that really came through, and it comes through with experts that understand the disease state, is the obstruction or the LVOT obstruction, left ventricular outflow tract obstruction. Because after all, these patients had to be obstructed to enter the trial. And we measure this by echocardiogram. So when compared with placebo in this clinical study, Camzyos reduced the obstruction 4 times that of the placebo arm. So in essence, if somebody had an LVOT, this obstruction gradient of 80, in the Camzyos arm, they dropped nearly down to 30. There was roughly a 10 millimeters of mercury decrease in the placebo arm. So if that patient had an LVOT of 80, they dropped to roughly 70. So here we see a pretty profound difference in the way Camzyos impacts obstruction in the obstructive HCM population. Next slide. All right, so then we talked about that functional endpoint, that LVOT, that obstruction. Now let's dive a little bit more into symptoms and how the patient feels. Remember, I mentioned both function and feel. So when we looked at New York Heart class Remember, these patients had to be heart class 2 or 3. They were not 1 asymptomatic, nor were they class 4 the most symptomatic. What we saw was that 2 out of 3 people taking Camzyos had their symptoms improve. So that feel component continued to show a strong signal in the Camzyos arm versus placebo. Next slide, please. Again, some other feel or symptomatic endpoints. We mentioned New York Heart Class, but we also measured symptoms with patient surveys. And this slide depicts 2 different surveys. On the left, you see this survey is called the KCCQ survey. And on the right, you see a shortness of breath HCM survey. And what we found for both of these symptomatic surveys, that there was a 3 times greater improvement in symptom burden and physical limitation when taking Camzyos versus placebo. So if I were to sum all of these efficacy endpoints up, again, the take-home messages for both feel and function, patients taking Camzyos has significant improvement versus the placebo arm. Next slide. I mentioned earlier a lot of important safety information around Camzyos, particularly the potential for heart failure. And on your left, you see that again. Anytime you have shortness of breath, chest pain, fatigue, racing heart, you need to notify your clinician. On the right, describe some common side effects with Camzyos, such as dizziness and fainting. Again, whenever experiencing dizziness or fainting, please contact your healthcare provider immediately. Next slide. Some more precautions. Again, in the important safety information, I mentioned drug-drug interactions. And on your left, this is a description of the conversation and the questions that your healthcare provider should be asking you. You really want to be aware and communicate when new medications are being added, doses are changed, if you start taking a supplement or over-the-counter medication. And on the left, you even see some sub-bullets of medications that interact with Camzyos, such as Prilosec or Nexium. These are heartburn medications that you can buy over the counter. There are alternatives, so please contact your healthcare provider if you take one of these medications. On the right, this is some important information that I do want to read and the conversation you should have with your provider. Camzyos may harm your unborn baby. Tell your healthcare provider right away if you become pregnant or think you may become pregnant during treatment with Camzyos. You may also report your pregnancy by calling BMS, reporting to the line below. If you are female and able to become pregnant, your healthcare provider will do a pregnancy test before you start treatment with Camzyos. You should use effective birth control contraception during treatment with Camzyos and for 4 months after the final dose of Camzyos. Camzyos may reduce how your hormonal birth control works. Talk to your healthcare provider for alternatives and about using alternative forms of birth control. Next slide, please. Some more important safety information. I will just touch on some highlights here. How should I take Camzyos? It is a once-a-day medication. You do not need to open this capsule or crush anything in the capsule. If you skip a dose, you take that dose as soon as possible. If you skip, for instance, a whole day, you just resume on the next day's dose. Next slide. Here is a highlight of the REMS program I mentioned earlier. And I think everything I mentioned earlier, the way that I distilled it down into the prescriber needs to be REMS certified. The patient, you have to have the conversation with your prescriber to get REMS certified, and the specialty pharmacy has to be REMS certified. Next slide. So I will stop there and hand it over to my colleague, Tim McGovern.
Hey, great. Thanks, Mike. And thank you for always providing a lot of very technical information in easily digestible form. So great job. And I appreciate that. So my job is to, after we've gotten through all of this clinical information and everyone's excited about this new first-in-class medication, to make sure that patients can get access. And when I speak about access, it means, will your insurance companies pay for it? So today I want to cover is kind of the overview of what the US healthcare market looks like. So if we go to the next slide. So as you may or may not be familiar, that most of the insurance providers are either considered commercial insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, or some sort of other. And an other could be you get your benefits through the VA or if you're active military, you get it through TRICARE. So there are other kind of forms, but the majority are these three. And as we're talking about that, this is a first in class. The clinical community is excited, but I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years trying to investigate how insurance providers are going to manage Camzyos. And there's a lot of education that needs to be done from an insurance perspective. They're very unfamiliar with this disease, and they're unfamiliar with Camzyos because in the past they've always had cheap generics, so low cost generics that they would pay for. So there wasn't a lot of management on their part. They were paying a lot of attention to this disease. So now that we've got a branded specialty medication in the market, there's a lot of education that needs to happen. But the good news is that we've been doing it since last summer. So my teams have been out talking to your insurance companies and educating them on the disease as well as what's to come for Camzyos. But I want to talk about these specific payers or insurers. So the commercial insurance is your out-of-pocket costs could vary, but we've developed programs and support and opportunities to really help patients who have commercial insurance. So that is if you are a working patient or if you're supported by insurance through a spouse or a family member, that is considered commercial insurance. So we have these programs that we have, and I'll touch on the out-of-pocket costs after this, but the expectations that we have are that the healthcare companies are going to pay for Camzyos with what is called a prior authorization to our label. And what that means is that the physician or office will have to fill out a prior authorization form, which you may be familiar with that term, as long as it aligns to what is in the approved FDA label, a lot of what Mike had just reviewed of what was in the Explorer trial, then that payer will generally pay for your coverage or your medication. But there will be a varying range of out-of-pocket costs. So if you have a commercial insurance, you may have a high deductible plan, and some of these high deductible plans can be expensive, but we've developed support programs to help you through that. And Tracy and Nilo will be talking a little bit more about that after. When it comes to Medicare, there are two different kinds of Medicare. So there are the standard Medicare Part D. This is an oral once-a-day drug. So we have Medicare Part D. This was a plan that was a program that was established back in 2006, and Patch is going to review a little bit of the details there. But the out-of-pocket costs for those patients could vary widely as well. But BMS is limited in the ability that we can help those patients. But the best choice for those patients and all patients is really to start with Camzyos. Once your physician has prescribed Camzyos, subscribing to or calling the Camzyos call center or website. Sorry. There's also the low income subsidy. And this is also called Extra Help. And I know that Patch will touch on this as well, but this is a patient population. It's about 25% of the overall Medicare patient population. That just means that you were Medicaid eligible and you've aged out. Now you're Medicaid and Medicare eligible. And those patients pay little or no copay, which is a great opportunity for those patients. The third section is around Medicaid. So there is rules in place around when Medicaid can cover it. But what we're starting to see is that many states have just started to approve Camzyos as part of their state Medicaids. And the latest and most exciting one is California. 13.5 million patients in California can get access through Medi-Cal. And there's lots of other states, Connecticut, Maryland, Alaska. They're all starting, Kentucky, they're all starting to approve. But the mandated time that they have to approve Camzyos is October 1st. So if they're not approving it now, they will have to by October 1st. The last one is around that other. So the military always seems to do it right. They were the first to approve Camzyos. They were with a low copay for all active military, and now it's also Camzyos is now available on in the VA. So any patient who's getting their prescriptions through the VA can now get Camzyos, which is really exciting. Now, not, now I know that we talked about that echocardiogram that was part of the REMS program that Mike had discussed. There's a lot of questions from physicians and from patients that will the echocardiograms be covered? Because the echoes are part of the Camzyos label, meaning that they're part of the REMS program, payers tell us that they will pay for them. So there's going to be a large number, there's going to be a number of echoes that need to happen. In the first few months, there's a few, and then it's going to continue on from that. But payers tell us, or managed care companies tell us, that they are going to pay for these echoes. So that is one of the biggest concerns we hear from your physicians. So be encouraged, be confident that they will be covered. So the last thing I wanted to touch on this slide is Mike had mentioned the specific specialty pharmacies that patients need to go to. Now the FDA is requiring us to have what's called a limited dispensing network. So we will have 4 national specialty pharmacies that you will be able to get your medication through, and all of those will be shipped to your house. There's no need to go to the CVS or local pharmacy around the corner. All of this will be done over the phone and through the mail. So you will be getting all of your Camzyos shipments through FedEx likely. But we can go to the next slide. So I wanted to put this, talk a little bit about this, because we've got a great opportunity for those commercially insured patients. No matter what your copay is, we have a copay program that will only cost these patients $10 a month. So no matter what your copay is, we are going to pay it down to $10 a month, which is really exciting for our commercially insured patients. For Medicare, there's going to be a varying cost, and it really depends what your cost is, depending on what phase of Medicare you're in. And I know Patch will go through that in a little bit more detail. But the best choice that you should be making is, once you're prescribed Camzyos, get into the My Camzyos program so that we can do a benefits investigation. And then lastly, if you have Medicaid, you're paying nothing more than between $0 and $20. And as I had mentioned, that there's a great opportunity between now and in October to get patients started. But after October 1st, all patients on Medicaid will have access to Camzyos. So I hope that this was helpful. Lisa and I have spent a lot of time talking about this over the last year or so, and we're very excited to bring Camzyos to market, and we want to make sure that you've got access to it. And so I'm going to turn it over to Tracy Lukey, who leads our patient marketing team, and talk to you a little bit more about our program.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. And I have to say, where you've spent the last year or so talking to insurance companies, I've gotten to talk to patients.
Yeah.
So I feel like I might have had a better deal there.
Yeah.
So my name is Tracy Lukey, and I'm the director for patient marketing. And I am going to talk to you a little bit more about what you've heard about the My Camzyos patient support program. And we can go ahead and advance probably 2 slides. There we go. So the My Camzyos patient support program was developed in partnership with HCM patients. Almost from day one, when we started working on this program, we started asking people who were living with obstructive hypertrophic cardiomyopathy what he or she may need when it comes to a patient support program. And we built it from the ground up with that patient voice loud in our ear. So we're really here with a program that's going to support you, answer questions throughout your treatment journey. Now, the program actually has 2 main components, and I'm going to talk about them separately, but I want you to understand that when you do, or if you choose to enroll in the My Camzyos patient support, both of these services will be available to you. One other thing I should note, while a lot of resources will be available, if you choose to go on therapy and have a prescription from your cardiologist, maybe you're at a stage where you just want to learn more for you. You want to talk to your cardiologist about the medication, ask some questions. It's okay for you to enroll in the patient support program now, just to learn more and have an informed dialogue. So we wanted to say that we've built this to talk to you regardless of where you are in your treatment journey and what your needs may be. So the 2 components to backtrack a little bit. First, my colleague Nilo, in a couple of minutes, I'll hand it over to her, is going to talk to you about the My Access Specialist program. The Access Specialist, as the name sounds, will be able to answer a lot of those financial or access aspects of the program that you might want to know about. So we'll talk about that. But now I'm going to spend a little time, and we can advance the slide, please. And I'll dig into the dedicated nurse navigator team known as My Nurse Navigators. Now, these are a team of nurses who have been hired to be just a resource to patients to understand more about Camzyos. And actually, once a patient has been prescribed Camzyos and has enrolled in the program, you'll be assigned your own dedicated nurse navigator who will guide you through the entirety of your experience with our program and on Camzyos. They will be there to answer questions you may have. So maybe you've gotten your prescription from your physician and you want to understand more. What was that drug to drug interaction my physician told me about? You can call up and talk to your nurse navigator, and they'll be fully prepared and are trained and actually out working with patients today to answer those questions about Camzyos. They'll also be there to help organize and keep track of key appointments. You heard about the need for echocardiograms, and the great news is, it sounds like from Tim, they'll be covered, but maybe just keeping it organized in your life. Your nurse navigators can set up with you appointment reminders, whether it's a text or a phone call or an email. So that's something that we had heard from patients they found would be valuable and is in market for you today. And there are other resources that will be available and that I'll talk to you in just a moment. But I wanted to reiterate one key point, which I think is important. The nurse navigators don't replace your cardiologist and your treatment team. So they're not there to advise on your medical condition. They're there to help you with Camzyos. So I wanted to make that very clear. But if we can advance the slide, this is some of the other resources I mentioned. So when you enroll in the My Camzyos program, we actually send you out your very own starter kit, which comes with a lot of what we hope to be valuable information and some tools to help keep you on track with your therapy. So you'll see the little graphic there with your calendar and some handy stickers so you can go in and keep track of appointments. We also will send you a full brochure that basically recaps almost anything you would have heard from all of us today. We provide a symptom tracker so that you can keep track of how you are feeling once you start therapy, so that you can have a good conversation when you go to check in with your doctor. And we also provide just a really comprehensive document of frequently asked questions. So we're hoping that for a patient who may be considering a Camzyos prescription or someone who's actually starting therapy, that we've got a robust program there to meet your needs. So with that, I'll hand it over to Nilo and she can tell you more about the My Access specialists.
Next slide. Thank you, Tracy. So I'll be talking to you about the My Access specialists. In addition to the nurse navigators, we wanted to provide our patients with as much assistance as possible, people that are going to help them navigate, the complexities of healthcare and understanding all of the resources that are available to them to help them access Camzyos. So once you and your doctor enroll in the My Camzyos program, we have a team of patient access specialists. And what those specialists will do is they're going to work with you and your insurance company to really understand what your specific coverage for Camzyos looks like. And they're going to help you understand what your out-of-pocket costs are for Camzyos. And then based on that, learn about resources that may be available for you. And we have a number of resources that we can point you to if you're eligible. So the first one is a free trial offer, which helps you get started on treatment. And so you may be eligible to have your first month of Camzyos free of charge. We have other financial resources as well, which include a copay program, which my colleague Tim had touched upon, where commercially insured patients may pay as little as $10 per month for their Camzyos prescription. We also have assistance available to help with the number of echoes that are required by the REMS program for Camzyos. And so in this, commercially insured patients may be eligible for copay assistance for those echocardiograms. If anyone has any questions about the resources that are available and whether they may or may not be eligible for them, you can always call 855-CAMZYOS for more information. And you can also sign up for those resources on mycamzyos.com. I'd like to hand it back to Michelle now.
Great. Want to say thank you to all of my colleagues here who've shared information about Camzyos and the programs that we've started. I think now, Lisa, what we'd like to do is open it up for questions. I do want to make sure, and you mentioned this at the start, Lisa, I want to reiterate, we can answer general questions about Camzyos, but we cannot provide medical advice or answer specific questions about a person's individual care. Your doctor, as always, is the best source of information about your health. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Lisa.
So we're going to play a little Q&A now. We've answered a couple of questions in the chat box or in the Q&A box. If you have a particular question, I would encourage you to use the Q&A box in the webinar and put your question in there. Do not use the chat. It doesn't allow us to address things appropriately. So use the Q&A box if you have a specific question. There are a few there already. And one of them is a very common question to the HCM community. And I think we can ask this in a general sense and then understand the label a little bit more in detail. So somebody who has had a previous surgical septal reduction or an extended myectomy, are they considered potentially clients or patients for Camzyos, given the fact that they've already had a myectomy? So I'll let you guys address this in a global sense. We're not specifically talking to each and every person who's had a myectomy. We're talking to those who have had a myectomy who are still symptomatic, but have a residual gradient of over 30 millimeters of mercury. You want to discuss how they would be able to use?
Yeah, so I'll jump in real quick, Lisa, and I'm glad you highlighted global, right? And so when we look at the label, and remember, I mentioned earlier this land-breaking trial, the Explorer program is the trial that informed the label, the trial and the data that actually led to the label. And so the Explorer program allowed symptomatic 2 and 3 patients into the trial. So you couldn't be extremely symptomatic, right? Class 4. However, there was a very small population within that trial that had previous myectomy, okay? When it comes to that level of clinical decision, that is discussion between the patient and the provider. But I just want to put that out there that the trial itself had a small population that had previous myectomy. And so again, I think that's a clinical discussion between patient and provider, but that was not an exclusion of the trial itself.
So to clarify and to just get a little bit more specific, because we know HCM is just a little complicated, any septal reduction therapy that they've had before, so an alcohol septal ablation, a surgical myectomy, if they are left with a residual gradient of 30 or greater and are symptomatic, they can have a conversation with their chosen healthcare provider. From the HCMA's point of view, HCMA recognized centers of excellence, people get proper management. That's me, not them. So I throw myself under here occasionally. So both of those would, and that would be the answer to both of those questions.
That's
So,
accurate.
correct?
Correct,
Correct.
that's accurate.
Okay. All right. Now they found the question and answer button. Where to find things. So they got lots of questions. I'm over here looking at another screen. What is the duration of care that we understand now for Camzyos?
So I'll jump in again. So the Explorer program was a 30-week trial, okay? We also have long-term extended studies that patients are enrolled in as well. So when it comes to the label and the way that the medication was approved, it is for long-term use. And we continue to collect this safety data and this efficacy data as time goes on.
So this would be a good time for me to bring up something called a phase 4 trial, surveillance. Can you guys speak to how that works? Because we're all still learning about this particular agent. And I'm not sure that everybody is aware of ongoing surveillance in a phase 4 trial. Can somebody speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So we have a number of ways that we kind of review this information and this data and these patients as time goes on. One of those is what Lisa, you just mentioned, phase 4 and registry data. So this is essentially longitudinal or long-term data, and we collect both safety and efficacy information on patients receiving Camzyos. In addition to that, the REMS program is actually this FDA-approved program that collects safety information as well. So not only do you have BMS-sponsored data or registries, but you also have the REMS program from the FDA that collects this safety data. So as time goes on, we will publish, and these presentations on this information will be available to the public.
Fantastic. Somebody asked, what does the term gradient mean? And do you need a certain level for Camzyos? I'm going to refer you back to the HCMA's website at 4hcm.org to understand gradient in more detail. We are also here to answer your questions at the HCMA, so you can contact us and we can set up what we refer to as a navigation call, which is different than the BMS patient navigators, same word, different programs run by different people, but we can help you understand the basic language around hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. And yes, you must have a certain gradient to qualify for Camzyos. Is that correct, BMS team?
Correct. You need to be obstructed, which would require a gradient. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm trying to keep this in some kind of an order. So Stuart, you asked a question, is Camzyos prolonging the eventual need for a myectomy? And the answer is, we don't know yet what the long term is going to be because we've only had the study design. But there's definitely at least a delay, if not the abolishing of the need for the therapy if the drug works in the individual to lower gradient. So you've asked an unanswerable question in a sense, but I'll throw it to BMS to see if they want to clarify it any bit.
So that is a question that we are pursuing and that we're looking into answering. There was recent information published on that exact question. It is not in our label at this current time, so we can't speak to it within our label. But that is a question that we have data on and we continue to explore.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, boy, they're a questiony bunch. I love that. Okay, so if somebody starts on Camzyos and they maybe do their 30-day trial, can they stop the drug safely at any time? Is there a rebound effect like people are used to seeing with beta blockers? How can they stop the drug if they no longer choose to be on it?
So that is absolutely a question and conversation you have with your healthcare provider. If somebody is a symptomatic obstructive HCM patient and they have symptom relief, we generally see that within a 3 to 4 week window. If they stop drug, we will often see symptoms come back in that 3 to 4 week window. However, any starting, stopping, change in dose has to be a conversation with your provider.
Fantastic, thank you for that. We've had a couple of questions on that one. Would someone need to remain on Camzyos long-term? I'm adding that word into their question to get benefits from Camzyos, or can they be on it for a short period of time and then stop it and have a benefit? Is there anything in the clinical trials that gives us insight there?
So at this current time, the recommendation is to start and continue on mavacamten. You will see symptomatic and functional benefit within a 3 to 4 week window. And the recommendation is continue on medication, and any change would be a conversation with the clinician. But again, take home message is within 3 to 4 weeks, you generally would see, if you're going to see, a clinical benefit.
Okay, so I answered a couple of people's questions on that one, so I knocked out a few. So that was live, that one was live, that one was live. State government employees insurance doesn't fall within the categories discussed. Are there programs for state employees? So help.
It's a
So,
great question for Tim.
I'll do my best to help you. So yes, there are federal employee programs as well, and they are managed generally through our large pharmacy benefit providers as well. So we are expecting the same kind of coverage that I had discussed as a prior authorization to label. Some of them do take a little bit longer. And when I had discussed, this is a lot of education that needs to happen. There's a lot of, not confusion, but they're not expecting Camzyos to the market because they're not looking for it. Because this is a small patient population, they're focused on, the larger heart failure, things that are millions of patients. When it comes to symptomatic obstructive HCM, this is a smaller patient population. So we do expect them to follow what our the prior authorization to label, but some of the bigger pharmacy benefit managers won't do their review until the fall, so September, October. But in that time frame where they haven't done that full review, they have what's called the medical exception process. And the medical exception process allows for access. So it allows for patients to get Camzyos approved before they have an official Camzyos policy in place. So we do expect that those patients will have access to Camzyos. So once you make that physician has made that decision, come to my Camzyos.
Okay, I am going to take some of their questions and kind of put something together here on this entire topic of payer education. Patients, we don't typically think of payers versus providers versus physicians, but in this space, we really need to be thinking about the payer education piece. And I just want the overriding HCM community to know that the HCMA is working on efforts to help with payer education, and not specific to a particular therapy, but overall understanding of HCM, because they still are getting what we consider basic stuff a little confused. Somebody was approved for a particular type of implantable device and not another, but there was no reason for it. So these are things that we, the HCMA, needs to do to engage the payer community to say, let us help you understand us a little bit better. So that is an ongoing effort. And patients who want to get involved may be asked to come to focus groups or roundtables for these types of discussions as we build out our payer education going further. So for HCM.org, volunteer page, yes, I want to help, go over there. So I get back onto my questions now. So I will be addressing the Medicare issues in a moment. So I'm not going to go there yet. I'll leave that question hanging, but anonymous attendee, I hear you. Are there various dosages that are used? And if you must switch dose in the middle of your treatment, is there an extra cost associated with dose switching?
Yeah,
Great question. for
great.
Michael.
Yeah, it's a good question. So everybody is recommended to start on Camzyos 5 milligrams by mouth once daily. There are the opportunity to increase dose or decrease dose based on the gradient we mentioned or based on ejection fraction. Okay, so as patients have their echo throughout therapy, those two measurements, that ejection fraction and left ventricular outflow tract gradient, become very important because they keep the patient safe and they give the opportunity for the provider to dose adjust and increase or decrease dose based on those measurements. The insurance question, if a patient were to change dose based on what is in the package insert, I would not expect a change in cost or impact of cost to the patient, because that again is on label dose adjustment based off these measurements. Tim, is that accurate?
Yeah, I'll be specific with it. There is no difference in the cost based on dose. So what we call a flat dose price. It's the same cost to the insurer, whether it's 5 milligrams or 10.
So some people may be concerned with where they're starting and what their dose is. I'm going to speak to what I know very well, which is anti-rejection medication for transplant, which is very different, but some people metabolize it differently than others, and thereby people who look the same, maybe the same size, maybe the same weight, they take very different doses because it's how their body metabolizes the drug. I assume this is the same with Camzyos.
Yes, this is dose adjusted and tailored to the patient. And the way we do that is those frequent echoes. So that initiation phase, echo at 4, 8, and 12 weeks, and then every 12 weeks after, that allows that prescriber to really tailor the dose to the patient response.
Fantastic, thank you. Can you give the left ventricular outflow tract numbers before and after Camzyos use? Can somebody speak to the gradient reduction that was seen in the Explorer or the LTE trial?
Sure, and we did have a slide in the presentation, and it's also available online in the package insert information. There was a mean reduction of roughly 50 millimeters of mercury in the Camzyos arm. So as mentioned, for example, if somebody entered with an LVOT gradient of 80 millimeters of mercury, then roughly you would see a drop down to close to 30 millimeters of mercury. The placebo arm saw a drop roughly around 10 millimeters of mercury after week 30.
And to remind everybody, gradients in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy are highly variable. They can change with hydration, medication, rest, fatigue, heat, cold, etc. So a 10-point shift is kind of average day stuff that we see every day in HCMA. So to see a drop of 50 millimeters of mercury, there is definitely something else going on there. And that's pretty much probably why you got those people down the FDA to give you a go ahead on this thing. So that would explain that. Military dependent insurance. So Betty, I'm going to answer your questions in two sections. I'm going to handle the Medicare question in a few moments when Gavin joins us. But if somebody has military insurance as a spouse or dependent, Tim, is there any difference there?
No difference. And if you want to be more specific, if you want to get specific for each patient, is to have the benefits investigation done through Camzyos. But there's no difference. So we spent a lot of time working with TRICARE and making sure that the military in the US and overseas, wherever they may be, and their dependents were covered and had access to Camzyos. And they were the first to approve it.
That's fantastic. Okay, so I am not surprised that Marianne would ask a very detailed question. But again, it's an awesome question. So thanks to my friend over in the Netherlands. Okay, and this is a tricky one. Echo EF measurements and the consistency thereof. So how, for the purpose of those who are watching who do not know what an ejection fraction is, can we address that? What is an average for the normal population, not hypertrophic cardiomyopathy? What is an average EF in HCM? And what does Camzyos do to the EF? And when do we think we might have a problem because it's going in the wrong direction?
Great.
Big question, sorry.
Loaded question. And so ejection fraction is really the percentage of blood that is ejected from that left ventricle, okay? And so what do we want to see in the general population? And I can't answer a lot of this directly because it depends on age, other disease states, other comorbidities, other medications, but you generally want to see an ejection fraction above 50%, okay? In the HCM heart, at times you see elevated ejection fractions, but not necessarily because the heart is working in this wonderful fashion. We know it's not, right? It's simply because that is a fraction and you have a smaller chamber, okay? But getting back to that 50% mark, that is really that threshold, 50 to 55%, that when clinicians see ejection fractions dropping around that number, we say, hold up, stop. And that's when Camzyos therapy has to be interrupted and a clinician has to have that conversation with the patient.
So I can speak to what I know out of the Explorer and the LTE trial, that a couple of people do get their EFs to drop down below that threshold amount. If caught in time, which is why we do these echoes, the drug can be discontinued. And then most of those that I saw in the trial restarted the drug at a lower dose and then went back into their regular echoes for follow-up. Is that a correct statement?
That's correct, Lisa. So 9 patients in Explorer had an EF drop below 50%, 2 in the placebo arm and 7 in the Camzyos arm. All patients were able to be interrupted and resume therapy and finish the trial.
Okay, so we're wrapping up on time for questions. There are a lot more questions here. What we can do is we can get back to you with verbal or email responses to the additional questions. I'm going to just kind of go through here and see if there's anything really targeting a lot of people. Okay, so that's a Medicare question. We're going to get to that. The use of beta blockers. Okay, so let's be real, people. Nobody likes beta blockers. They're just not fun drugs to use, but they're highly effective in HCM. We just don't like the side effects. Will people need to stay on their beta blockers at their current dosing? Or is that a conversation they can have with their healthcare provider about how to manage other medications on top of Camzyos?
Yeah, great question. So within the trial that again allowed for the label, roughly 70% of patients on Camzyos also were on background beta blocker. So Camzyos can be used with background beta blocker. In terms of starting, stopping, and adjusting doses of other medications like beta blocker or calcium channel blocker, that is without a doubt a conversation you have with the clinician. Again, frequent echoes are an amazing safety net to see how patients are responding to therapy.
Okay, 2 other ones, and then we're going to wrap the questions and we're going to go over to Gavin and we're going to talk about Medicare, and then we'll talk about some other issues related to Medicare. So how many echocardiograms are required in the first, when you're loading on Camzyos? And a financial question associated to that. So there is an Echo Assist payment program for some patients based on their insurance. Can you discuss how many echoes and what the copay assist on echoes looks like?
Great. I'll start off and then kick it over to my friend Tim. So within the initiation phase, remember, so patients start on mavacamten or Camzyos 5 milligrams, and echo at week 4, 8, and 12 is considered the initiation phase. After that, every 12 weeks.
And then after every 12 weeks at this point in perpetuity,
That is correct.
because the FDA has required such. But there could be a time where the FDA says, we have ample data and we know these are the points that we now need to go to. So there are things that are done at launch. We learn, we revise, we tell people what the revision is, and we move on. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. We are continually generating data to see the best way to take care of patients.
Good answer. Tim, the money
Yes,
part.
And now I'll answer the financial question. So the echocardiogram copay support program is for commercially insured patients only. We are not allowed to assist government insured patients for any out of pocket, but the copay program, we've designed it to be able to manage about 98% of the types of insurance coverage that there is. So we do believe that between the copay card for the drug and the copay card for the echo, that will cover 100% of the copays for commercially insured patients.
So if you can't answer this one, I apologize because I might be getting an out specific here. But patients who have an out-of-pocket copay and deductible maximum, if they are falling into, they haven't met their copays and deductibles for the year and they have a mavacamten Camzyos prescription and they need to get these extra echoes. So their copays and deductibles for the year are taken care of by the assistance program. Would that be correct?
Yeah, so if the patient has a deductible and 98% of, the highest out-of-pocket deductible for a family in the US is about $15,000. Most people don't have that much of a deductible, and we've designed the copay card to have a value of $15,000. And the copay card for the echo is $2,500. So we don't expect that we're going to max those out, but insurance companies do have some tricks to try to not allow us to provide that to patients, but we've got answers for that as well. So, but to answer your question, the out-of-pocket cost, the deductible should be covered by both the drug and the echo copay programs for commercially insured patients.
Fantastic. And the last question, which I've asked you guys about behind the scenes, so I'm going to ask it in person. We've got a couple of questions about the use of Camzyos in those under the age of 18. And are there any trials coming up for our young population who their parents may be interested in learning about?
Yeah, our clinical trial development team is investigating the pediatric population with Camzyos at this current time. Lisa, you know, the answer is no data at this current time, but that is a question that our clinical trial development team is trying to answer.
And that somebody who might be sitting here right now, like me, keeps asking about. So our kids need a trial too. We haven't had one there yet, so we're hoping to do that. Okay, to everybody else who answered or asked a question that did not get a specific answer, we will try to get back to you one-on-one with those answers. There are some Medicare questions here that we're going to go into our next segment for, and we will address those. However, if you have any questions, you can contact the, Jen, you're not, you just sent that to the host. So we will put a number here, the 800 number. If I can, for some reason, I can't copy that into chat. If one of my team could put the phone number in chat, so everybody has the phone number to BMS Medical Communications directly, so they can ask their questions there. They can also call the HCMA office and we can give them guidance as best we can and other resources as well. So our phone number is 973-983-7429, or you can email us at this watermark that somehow is appearing over my Zoom screen. So that is our email. I'm not quite sure why it's there, but no doubt that you have not noticed our email address through this webinar. So only the host can do that. So Ross or Elena, can you do that? Or maybe only I can right now. I'll have to do that in a minute. All right, so next I am going to ask to come to screen Gavin, who I put on can't see you a few moments ago as our panelist. And Gavin, can you come back on screen for us? I can't even see your.
I think somebody needs to add me back in.
Oh, I just turned off your camera. Where are you? Huh, shoot, where are all my people? Give me 1 second here. We have a technical glitch because we were all on camera and I forgot to ask everybody to do that. So give me 1 itty bitty second. Panelists, here we are. Sorry about that, Gavin. More, ask to start video. So it should ask you to start the video. Could you, there you are. I'm sorry about that. Okay.
No problem. Thank you, Lisa.
So, no problem. BMS, I am going to black your screen for a moment so we don't confuse everybody with, I guess I do that up here. Turn off, stop video. Okay, so I will bring them back in a minute. Gavin actually comes to us through a friend of a friend. So the patient patient, oh my gosh, Advances for Cardiovascular Health is the core organization, and you are with the Alliance for Patient Access. Gavin is I'm going to slow down a minute here. Gavin served as a former legislative director to Congressman Alan Mullihan, and has 2 decades of policy experience with the Alliance for Patient Access, where he helps to provide advocates the appropriate level of access for patient care. And he knows a lot more about Medicare Part D than I do. So I've asked him to come and explain this for the very specific point that I have a lot of you who are in that 60+ age range who are trying to manage what options you might want to utilize in terms of managing your HCM. So we wanted to prepare you for what Medicare does and doesn't do. And please remember the problems that exist within Medicare as a system are not Gavin's fault or mine. It is above our pay grades. So we are trying to work within the system that we have most effectively. Gavin, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. I've got a short PowerPoint, if it's okay, if I could share my screen and we'll just walk through kind of Medicare
Absolutely.
101.
Perfect.
Let's see if we can do this. Can you see that?
We can.
Perfect. Thank you. And so I'm very pleased to be here today. Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm with the Alliance for Patient Access, which is a nationwide network of healthcare professionals who come together to focus on the patients of patient-centered healthcare. And so we focus on the primacy of the healthcare provider-patient relationship, making sure that they get to make the healthcare decisions that they feel are best for their continued care. We accomplish this mission through educating clinicians on issues impacting patient access and empowering them to engage policymakers. And so Medicare is certainly somewhere where we spend a significant amount of time and energy because it covers so many important issues and so many important people. So we're going to do a little bit of a level set with what is Medicare. Medicare is one of the health insurance programs that we talked about earlier in the program, but it's a federal health insurance program largely for our seniors. So for folks who are 65 years and older are eligible to enroll in Medicare. Certain younger people with disabilities are also eligible to enroll. And then people with end-stage renal disease can also enroll in Medicare. And so this is the healthcare insurance program for our senior citizens. Medicare really has kind of 4 different parts. And so we'll walk through each one of the parts because they're important to understand them. And so what would be considered original Medicare is Medicare Part A and Part B. So Part A is the hospital insurance benefit. So inpatient care, skilled nursing facilities, hospice care, and some home health care is covered through Medicare Part A. Medicare Part B is what we would consider medical insurance. And so this is your doctor services, your outpatient care, medical supplies, and preventative services. And so A and B are what are considered original Medicare. About 20 years ago, Medicare Part D was added to the program. And so this is what we would consider the prescription drug coverage benefit. So this is when you think about a pharmacy benefit, your typical pharmacy benefit. It is separately enrolled from Part A and Part B, and the government encourages individuals who become eligible for Medicare to enroll in Medicare Part D right as they start their Medicare coverage policies. In fact, they have fairly significant financial penalties for people who delay in enrolling in the Medicare Part D coverage. The interesting part about Part D is it's run by the private sector. So this is private healthcare insurance, and you have to pay a premium in order to access that care. As I said, Medicare Part D helps to pay for prescription drugs. And so to obtain this coverage, you must join a Medicare approved plan that offers drug coverage. There are 2 different ways to get it. There are Medicare Advantage plans, so MA plans, or what would be referred to as Part C plans. These are private sector run healthcare plans that cover Part A, the hospital, Part B, the medical, and Part D, the pharmacy, all in one coverage, or you would separately enroll into the Part D program. So once you're enrolled in a Part D program, you have a pharmacy benefit, but it is a little bit more complicated than simply maybe what you might see in a traditional commercial pharmacy benefit. And so there are several phases of coverage that individuals have to pass through as they go through their pharmacy benefit. So the first phase, the opening phase, is a deductible phase. And so the individual enrollee in the Part D program has to pay the entire deductible amount for covered prescriptions up to a certain price point. So the first several $100s come directly from the patient to be paid out through this deductible phase. Once an individual has met their deductible, though, they go into what's called the initial coverage phase. And so this phase here, which runs up to about $4,400 of out-of-pocket expenses, the participant pays 25% of the drug cost. And so these drug costs are negotiated between the insurance provider. There are several different providers of Part D and the manufacturers, but the patient responsibility remains 25% of the drug cost. And then there's a donut hole, what's referred to as donut hole, a coverage gap. Once the Part D plan and the patient between their co-payments spend roughly $44,430, they go into a gap where the pharmaceutical company, the manufacturer, takes over that gap, and the patient still has some exposure and liability in that phase, but the manufacturer then picks up and pays that other 75% of what the out-of-pocket cost would be. And then finally, unfortunately, some patients go right through the donut hole all the way to the catastrophic coverage phase. So this is when you spent more than $7,000 a year on prescription drugs between all payers. So between the insurance plan, between the manufacturer, and between the individual, the covered individual. Once you get to $7,000, you come into the catastrophic phase. Unfortunately, the patient still has some exposure here, that 5% of their prescription drug costs, but the remainder is picked up by the federal government. And so patients have to work their way through each one of these coverage phases as they go with their medications. And obviously it goes off the cost of the medication. And so it's unpredictable how fast or how quickly or slowly somebody would move through these phases. I talked about Medicare Advantage. Medicare Advantage plans combine A, B, and D together into one plan. They're offered by private companies and approved by the Medicare program. Most of these have pharmacy benefits in them, but they are more limited in other ways. But we just want to flag that there are two different ways that you can get your pharmacy benefit through Medicare. Importantly, each Medicare beneficiary receives an explanation of benefits every month. And so the government will mail them or email them an explanation of their benefits. This is not a bill, and it doesn't explain what things are costing you. But what it does do is tell you what phase you're in of the Part D program, and then what your total out-of-pocket payments to date have been, and then other detailed information about the claims. And this allows people to manage their expectations and know where they are within the process so that they can help understand and how to cover their medical, their pharmacy benefits and costs. So the Part D out-of-pocket maximums, we talked about this on the early part of the presentation. Commercial insurance all have out-of-pocket maximums. The Part D program does not have an out-of-pocket maximum. And so this is something that people need to be aware of. Even once you've spent this significant amount of money, $7,500, you still have 5% copay of your medication costs that will continue forward. On the other hand, Medicare Advantage plans typically do have an out-of-pocket cap. It may vary by plan, but they do in fact have an out-of-pocket cap. On the Part D program, this is very out of step with any other insurance product that's out there that folks take the benefit of, the no out-of-pocket cap. And this is something that Congress is looking at closely right now and trying to address as they're going through kind of the drug pricing conversation and trying to help individuals. And so in addition to insulin issues, this out-of-pocket cap in Part D is something that they're spending a significant amount of time and energy on. I want to flag one thing that's out there to help folks. So for folks who are income limited, there's the Extra Help program or the Medicare Low Income Subsidy program. About 25% of Medicare beneficiaries qualify for this program, and it gives them extra resources in order to pay for their costs, their Medicare costs. It can be used for premiums, it can be used for deductibles, and it can also be used for co-insurance to cover your medications. And so this is one program that's out there. There are other programs out there to help that I think will be touched on as well in this program. But we wanted to cover, kind of what the benefit looks like, how important it is to enroll in the benefit, but also kind of where the exposure for individuals sits within that program. I'm going to pause there. Here's my email address if folks have questions that they want to ask me at some point in the future. Otherwise, I'll be here with Lisa to try to help answer any questions now. And so if I can unshare my screen.
I can help you with that.
I think I got it.
You got it. Okay, I do want to bring up a Camzyos direct issue. If an attendee has a question, I see a hand raised. We're going to need you to use the Q&A box. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should see a Q&A option, and you can type your question in there, and you can lower your hand because we will not be opening microphones today. So I do want to bring one other program to everybody's attention, and I'm going to screen share here for a second. So we have been working with the Healthwell Foundation for Medicare patients. And this is their website, and they are providing an opportunity for Medicare patients to receive up to a $10,000 award for their prescription to cover their out-of-pocket expenses. You need to be, and this is a pretty high level, 500% of poverty level. So if you are still working at 65, you may not hit this number, but if you are retired or working part-time at this point, this may let you qualify, and you can receive a grant to use that money for premiums or for co-pays or for echoes, anything that is related to your Camzyos prescription. So that is one foundation we are working with. There may be others. If this one doesn't work for you, let us know. We may have a couple of other options coming up in the future as well. So I think what this speaks to is the awareness that there are various access points, and there are a lot of different variables that we all deal with in managing health insurance access. But there have been a number of resources already developed and put in place for the private insurer and the Medicare patients, that there's help there. If you want to try it, you shouldn't be deterred by a financial decision. There are lots of opportunities here. Gavin, we did have some questions. Somehow some of my questions got cleared. Who's clearing my Medicare questions? Unless people withdrew them because you did such a great job of explaining it all. I think
Not
that's
possible.
It's possible. I think it's possible. So there were some questions over the echoes, and I know this is not your definitely, you're not a Camzyos expert, but if somebody were to be billed for echoes that were on a label, they're just going to be charged their regular Medicare payments for that part of it, correct?
I believe that would be correct.
Okay, and we've got a cute dog walking in the background. We like
Sorry.
dogs. No, don't apologize. We like dogs. Dogs are good. Okay, so I think that answered that question. I'm gonna go a little forward thinking here in the current situation. What changes do you think might come through Medicare? We all know that it's a crisis. We've got to do something. Does there look like there'll be any activity at the federal level to make some of these changes that we so desperately need?
That's a great question. And so I think, as everybody knows, Congress is currently in the process of trying to come through with a drug price negotiation package, funding package. I can't pontificate on whether that's going to be successful or not successful, but I can say that this is the furthest we've seen Congress go towards helping our seniors with a Part D out-of-pocket cap. It's been a conversation for the past 2 or 3 or 4 years of trying to make sure that that program, that pharmacy benefit, gets some certainty for our seniors. And so the current proposal would cap their annual out-of-pocket at $2,000, which is still a significant amount of money, but it's certainly having the ability to plan and know what your out-of-pocket expenses would be a significant improvement for our seniors. And so regardless of what's happening with the other larger policy questions, we've seen significant progress in a recognition that a Part D out-of-pocket cap would be something that Congress should consider, and they certainly are taking it very seriously at this point. So I would like to say we might see that happen for us.
So I would be remiss if the patient advocate in me didn't say, this is a really good time for you to contact your elected officials and explain to them how this might be adversely affecting you. And remember, they're there to work for you. So please use your voice, please use your vote to make sure that the changes that you feel are necessary for you and your family are top of mind for your elected officials. I don't know how else to put that more strongly, but y'all need to get involved and use your voice. So we have, I'm going to send some documents as a follow-up to this webinar on some economic models that can be used to figure out how much it would cost to have drugs that are at higher prices. This is not an inexpensive drug. This drug is in the $89,000 to $90,000 a year range. And that means to somebody on Medicare that could be a very big out-of-pocket expenditure, which is why I would really encourage people to look at the HealthWell Foundation, because that $10,000 grant opportunity may cover your out-of-pocket expenses here. But Gavin, could you explain how, like a very big dollar drug, it would be the first couple months will be a higher deductible and copay, and then it balances off over time to a much lower rate, although still a high, you're talking $300 to $400 a month at the 5% rate. So can you explain what that drop looks like from the highest to the average for the rest of the year?
Yes, I can certainly try. And so you raise a very important point, which is much of this prescription drug benefit is front loaded. The cost of it is front loaded. It starts at the beginning of the calendar year. So you return the new calendar year and all that you've paid goes back to zero. And so you immediately have your entire deductible that you must meet. And so if you're paying 25% of the cost of an expensive medication, that first $400 to $440 is going to come directly from you, plus whatever remainder is up to that 25% for that treatment. And then come the second month and the third month, you will be in that same situation until you get towards the the coverage gap. And so immediately you're responsible for all of the costs, but then you share that cost, but it's still significant cost until you get to that coverage gap. And then ultimately until you get to that catastrophic. And once you get to that catastrophic, your exposure goes down to 5% per month, but it still can be significant. And so this is something that really needs to be remedied through legislative efforts in order to help either put a flat cap, but also to help a smoothing mechanism so that the cost can be spread out throughout the calendar year. We know that folks will stay on their medications month over month over month. And so there's it doesn't serve a good purpose to force a large out-of-pocket expense up front, which might deter people from starting or certainly would deter adherence. And so these are policy issues that need to be considered.
It's a huge problem because we know seniors and those on disability ration their own medications inappropriately oftentimes. So we want to make sure that patients don't fall into those situations, and we're trying to set up as many safety nets as possible so that there's some financial support as you go forward with your prescription. Carmen, I hope that answered your question. We've answered that live. Stephen, I'm asking Ross to please drop Gavin's email in the chat box, or one of my staff if they can do that, because I can't copy and paste at the same time. Gavin, is there anything else patients should be thinking about when they're signing up for Medicare, or they are at their election period where they can make changes? Is there an advantage to an Advantage program, or is there a disadvantage to an Advantage program?
That's a great question, and there's, I wouldn't say there's an advantage or a disadvantage. It's really kind of it's tailored to an individual's need. And so one of the flexibilities that comes with Medicare Advantage plans is that they do have flexibility to add in additional benefits that you wouldn't get through the traditional Medicare program. And so they may have vision coverage, or they may have dental coverage where you would not typically get that through. And so that seems to be something that people value and have enticement. On the other hand, though, they're more restrictive in who you can see, what providers you can see, your provider networks. You have more like an HMO model rather than a PPO model. And so, it's a check and balances. I would encourage, folks, and this is very confusing stuff, but I would encourage folks to work with the patient advocacy community and organizations such as yours, who can help them understand kind of the nuances of the programs that you're taking. One thing that I will say is, if you're going to go through the traditional Medicare route, be very careful about enrolling in Part D at the start. There is a punitive penalty that comes every month that you don't enroll after your initial enrollment period. And I believe it may be a 10% increase in premium per year that you don't enroll, or something along those lines. And so that's one thing that I would flag for folks is make sure that when you're getting your benefits, that you're checking that you're enrolling for the benefits you think you will need long-term, not just the ones that you'll need in the near term.
Fantastic. We just had a really good question here, and I was going to ask this myself. So plan year for Medicare starts when?
January 1?
January 1. So if somebody were going to want to make the most of their Medicare dollars, if they were to start something mid-year, they'd have to pay their copays and deductibles again on January 1.
I believe that's true.
Okay, so you want to be fiscally responsible when you're starting a new medication, when you're planning a surgery, when you're planning a device implant. All of these things, you need to kind of look at your annual calendar for chronic disease management to be financially, aware. And there may be times of the year that are more advantageous than others for certain subgroups to start different therapies or consider different things. So Ross, thank you for asking, I'm sorry, Stuart, thank you for asking that question. That was very helpful. Another question. My experiences with the Advantage plans have not been good. They operate like HMOs and they bar access to specialists. My experience coming from being a health plan administrator back in the day to my role in patient advocacy, I find that PPOs serve our population better, and HMOs can often limit access to high volume center of excellence care. So I would tend to lean into an HMO, or check in advance that your physicians are covered in a particular Advantage program. And that may be something that we start looking into a little bit more as we approve new centers to come onto the HCMA recognized Center of Excellence programming. So thank you for that comment, Anonymous. I agree. Okay, so I'm going to thank Gavin for his time today. I've got a couple follow-up slides, and then I'm going to take a second at the end to go into my email, pull Gavin's email, and put it in for everybody for chat, because for whatever reason, only the host can chat with everybody. Sorry about that. So I'll put that in the chat in a moment, and we will be sending a follow-up email with some of these links to all of those who participated. And again, if you have any questions, please contact us. So if we could bring our BMS crew back in to just wrap up here real quickly. They can hit their little button and come back. And I'm going to go put my slides back up. Thank you, BMS crew. So I wanted to just get rid of that for a moment. Again, remind everybody about the Health Well Foundation. You can find this information on the HCMA website under our Camzyos page, as well as some other resources that will be there. I would be remiss if I did not thank our staff behind the scenes and our board of directors, which I spelled wrong because I was in a really big hurry cleaning something up. So they're directors, not directors, for helping us do everything that we do every day. And I really need to thank our friends at Bristol Myers Squibb and the Alliance for Patient Access for their time and their expertise that they shared with us today. It's a complicated time. It's an exciting time. We have some new therapies that we're hoping that you and your families will partake in if it is appropriate for you, and that you're working with a high volume HCMA recognized Center of Excellence physician to assess whether or not this is a good treatment option for you or not. So I will stop there, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today. So thanks, Team BMS. Thanks, Gavin.
Thanks.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, everyone.
You are very welcome. I will get that email up in the chat in just a second here, but I can't end the I can't end the stream until I do so. So we're going to type really fast because everybody wants to know how to get to Gavin and ask Gavin his important insight on whatever questions I have related to Medicare. And of course, I'm having a problem finding the email.
It's just Gavin. So Gavin.
Hold on one second, Gavin. We're going to do this live here. Gavin.
At
Oh, this is easy.
allianceforpatientaccess.org.
For patient. I keep putting spaces in .org. Okay. I hope that's right.
It's close.
I think I got it right.
I
Okay.
think so. Thanks, Lisa.
Okay, so there we go. I thank you all for joining us today. This presentation will be available directly from the HCMA website in a couple of days, maybe sooner. And I thank you all for your time, attention. And I do need to make a little statement that this is not common business practice for Bristol Myers Squibb. And when I originally made this request about a year ago, they all looked at me and went, shh, we'll think about how we can do that. I didn't get a yes, I didn't get a no, and I just kept nudging and pushing the rock up the hill. And I have to thank Jen Costello and Tony from behind the scenes to help make this all happen. And Tom Gardner for making this happen as well. I know we had some advocates on the inside of BMS saying, we want to talk to the patients directly. Really, we know it's not normal, but it's okay. So thank you for being a little bold and going beyond the typical approach so that patients could hear directly from this team. And I have to tell you guys, these are the people who actually built the programs. These are people I've been working with behind the scenes for a long time, and they are helping build what you need to have so that you can get access if you so choose and if it is deemed appropriate for you. There's more to come. There's more clinical trials to come. There's more partnership to come. But I am hoping that this is a step in the right direction to bring pharma, patient advocacy, patients, clinicians, everybody together for the shared purpose. And the skies are
That was a yes.
Yes, we have approval from above. Okay. That was really good timing. So I thank you all for your time today, and we might come back at some future time to have some other conversation like this. And I encourage all the patients to reach out to the HCMA if they need anything else. Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thanks, everyone.
Everyone.